And a warm welcome to all of you, both here in Brussels and online, to this very first hybrid event at EIF. We are very excited, believe me, to be able to meet some of the EIF members in person, finally after so long in a 3D format. The energy is great. We also expect about 50 participants joining us online. And today, as you know, we will discuss the EU Artificial Intelligence Act. Is it the right framework for trustworthy AI and innovation? We are together with our hosting MEP, Brando Benifei. Brando is an MEP with the S&D Group, member of the Special Committee on Artificial Intelligence in a Digital Age, and of course, rapporteur for the AI Act for the IMCO Committee. Grazie, Brando. Thank you very much for being here with us in person today and also for taking the lead at EIF on this very, very hot topic. I'm also glad to see in the audience one of your colleague MEPs, Ivan Stefanek, who's the EIF Programming Committee co-chair. Welcome. Now, I would like to introduce our speakers of today. One of them, he's here in the room with us, Frederico Oliveira da Silva, Digital Rights Senior Legal Officer at BEUC. Welcome. And we're also joined by 4 speakers online. Jordanka Ivanova, Legal and Policy Officer at the Unit of Artificial Intelligence Policy Development and Coordination at DG Connect, European Commission. Julien Vignon, AI Policy Lead at the French Ministry for Economy and Finance. Andrea Renda, Senior Research Fellow and Head of Global Governance, Regulation, Innovation and Digital Economy at CEPS. Last but not least, Emilia Tantar, Chair of Digital SMEs Focus Group on Artificial Intelligence. Thank you all very much for joining us today. Brando, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you to EIF. Thank you, Maria Rosa. Thank you. Yes, the mask. We are almost used to keep them always, but we can do it for now, just for the time of my speech. But so I was saying thank you to EIF, thank you for this timely debate, because I was very pleased to host it today, because we are also going to have in this afternoon the exchange of views with the Commission in the Parliament regarding our AI regulation. So we are in a very important moment for the strong start of the formal work of the Parliament on the file. However, I can tell you very clearly that the Parliament in these last months has been doing a lot of informal discussion already with the stakeholders like the ones that are here today. I want to give a greeting and a thank also to all the other speakers that we will listen to later, that have been important interlocutors, as well as with many think tanks, with the council representatives, with the other MEPs. We have started looking at what we want from the regulation based on the draft proposal of the Commission. We want to strengthen the legal certainty of the text. We want to have clarity. We want clearer definitions. We want to be sure that we can give a real message of trust and of understanding for this big change that will take place with the more and more uptake, the bigger and bigger uptake of AI in our European Union. We want the regulation to be clear also on the balance between respect and defense of fundamental rights. We think the Parliament has to play an important role on strengthening this aspect, with the capability of building a dynamic, a competitive and resilient ecosystem for AI to be developed in EU. This means that we will look very carefully about especially the high-risk part, which is extensive, and it's now foreseeing a general self-certification This is a topic that will need debate. Do we need some ex-ante certification? Can we do that without building unnecessary burden for the AI introduction of AI products in our single market? How can we strengthen the objective of fighting fragmentation of the single market in this field? We want to be sure that all citizens can feel safe with the usage of AI, citizens, consumers, and organizations alike. And we want to support, for example, with the sandboxes, the innovation and the development of new ideas and new business models. We want to be sure that these instruments are and these legal frameworks are accessible, are linear, are clear, so that everyone can access them. So we need to invest also in training, in learning for our citizens, for our workers, so that there is understanding. We know that there are very sensitive issues that we will need to look at. I just mentioned the issue of the social scoring and the issue of biometric surveillance. It's being already at the heat of the debate, also at the public level, and we want to be sure that we reach solutions that are able to make everyone feel safe with their data, with the usage that AI the usage of AI in the public sphere. So the Parliament will have a big role to play. I have to say, in these days already, I've been, and in the past months, meeting with many representatives also of the Council, because we need to be able to have a dialogue with the Member States so that we are not taking too much time to finalize a negotiation on a difficult file, a complicated file, that, however, is a needed new regulation for EU to lead at the world level on a model for competition on AI that is based on trustworthiness, of a human-centric approach, on the defense of fundamental rights, and on the ability to compete at a global level with support from the public institutions towards all the creativity, all the innovation that can come from our developers on this important, exciting to some extent, new sphere of the digital world and also of the material world. We know AI, how much is part of this intersection with IoT, with the internet, with the robotics, with the machinery discussions. In the end, and I conclude on this, our regulation will intertwine with all the data protection regulations that we have in place, not only GDPR, but also all the other norms, with the machinery regulation, with all the other digital files that are being discussed, even DSA and DMA that are under now the negotiation. So it will be a very important work to push forward. The Parliament is ready to do its part, and we are very happy that today we can also have this opportunity to discuss together on such an important topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Brando, for setting the scene for this debate and also for sharing the first impressions of the proposed regulation. I would like now to invite Jordanka Ivanova with DG Connect, the European Commission, to take the floor.
Thank you very much, first of all, for this invitation and having the opportunity to be here with all of you to the European Internet Forum for organizing this very timely discussion, and also to MEP Benifei for also steering the work in the European Parliament on this important file for our European digital agenda. So indeed, this is very important to have all representatives in this dialogue and all views, and I'm happy we are going really to focus and discuss now on the file, and that we, the European Commission, the Council and the European Parliament, we all understand the urgency and the need to regulate artificial intelligence with all its challenges, complexities. And actually, we all agree on the key principles, how this regulation should look like and its final objectives. So the AI Act, as proposed by the Commission, it's been the result of very intense work for many years in involvement with many stakeholders. It's a unique opportunity to make Europe a global leader in trustworthy and human-centered artificial intelligence, and to ensure that all Europeans and businesses can reap the benefits of these promising technologies. Whose use should be safe and respectful of our rights and European values. So I just want to highlight maybe a bit the starting point as we certainly start this negotiation process with the Commission proposal and some of the key principles we try to follow in this. And one of them is indeed to build a proportionate, balanced framework, which is built on the risks. It follows the risk-based approach. So it regulates only where strictly necessary. We try to enable innovation and uptake, but at the same time, we try also to address the key risks, the fundamental rights, safety, health, and the problems associated with specific uses of the technology, because we have to really frame it in different contexts and uses to ensure our approach is proportionate. We've also chosen to go for a horizontal act, and we think this is a dimension that it's really important to be preserved. Because this is essential to create a strong European single market, to remove barriers, and also to have one single law on artificial intelligence applicable to all EU member states in a uniform manner, because we are also dealing very often with the same challenges, and also we have transversal applications of the technology that don't recognize sectors. Another key principle is really to keep the regulation flexible and future-proof, because we are dealing with a technology that is developing really fast. We see that already the legislative process up to now has taken us a lot of time, and we know that it will take even more before the regulation becomes applicable. So that's especially reflected in the way we propose to define certain definitions like artificial intelligence, to have a more flexible approach, how we identify which are the high-risk use cases, so we can respond to this technology and market developments over time, and also the way we are going to learn more about the risks that actually we are going to deal with. And also to rely on this success story of our internal market based on harmonized legislation and harmonized standards, where we really give the right tools to providers, users, how they can really demonstrate compliance. So that brings me to another very important point, that indeed we've tried to focus with these proposals by proposing practical obligations and requirements, taking into account the different roles of operators, also the common agreement we've reached with the high-level expert group on also the requirements and the principles we want this system to fulfill and to respect. And then also it's quite important in this context also to give the right tools and support for organizations to be able to effectively comply with their obligations. So this is very important for us, and we think that we are investing a lot on improving the legal certainty, but also giving the toolbox for companies to comply. Support for innovation and SMEs is also one of the key aspects we have tried to reinforce, and we think more can be also discussed with stakeholders, as it is very important to build this ecosystem of excellence and also innovation in a competitive way, helping our SMEs. Here, regulatory sandboxes and various measures proposed in the regulation, but also the coordinated plan on AI which creates the right conditions and tools, building on which we should all, with member states, work together, should help us become really a global center of excellence in this field. And finally, I would also like to emphasize that, as mentioned by MEP Benifei, we should not forget that the AI Act is just one piece of the big puzzle, where we have extensive EU regulations in many fields. AI, even today, is not in a legal vacuum. We are actually building with this AI Act a comprehensive regulatory approach, so we can deal with all the different acts comprehensively in a consistent manner, also with the different risks and gaps we have tried to identify. So indeed, we have a very robust legislation on data protection, product safety, consumer protection, and it's quite important to make the AI Act consistent, to avoid overlaps, and also to smoothly integrate these new obligations into the existing framework. So with this, I just also want to emphasize that we are in a very crucial moment now, and it's really good that we all share with the Parliament and the Council the political will to move forward on this file and find a common agreement together with all stakeholders to even further improve it. But at the same time, also don't forget the timeline and work extensively in this year, so we can have the regulation adopted on time, and we can also, like this, lead on emerging global standards and discussions that are already taking place in other international institutions. So with this, I stop here, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion.
So no pressure there, right? Jordanka, thank you very much for touching upon many important points of the proposal, and also for reminding us that this is a unique opportunity for the EU to become a leader in this space. I'll now give the floor to Julien Vignon with the French Ministry for Economy and Finance.
Thank you so much, Maria Rosa. Thank you so much for the invitation to EIF, and thanks to MEP Benifei for setting the tone for this very timely debate. My name is Julien Vignon, and I am Policy Lead for Artificial Intelligence at the Ministry of Finance and Digital Affairs in France. And my team leads for France on the AI Act. Now, there's something I want to clarify at the onset, that today I will speak only in a personal capacity and not in the name of the presidency, because as you know, the presidency has to be neutral and is not pushing for any given agenda. Its mission is really to bring consensus within the 27, so within the 26 other positions. Now, there's still a lot of things that I'd like to say about this text. And first, I would really like to commend the work of the Commission, and Jordanka has made a comprehensive tour about it already. There's one thing that has not been mentioned that I think is important. It's that we have, for the first time, a legally binding text on the table. This is a world premiere, and this is happening in Europe. So let's not forget this. So I really praise the work of the Commission for building on the work that has been done by the high-level expert group on AI, and really having this text now on the table. Now, is it perfect, this text? Personally, I do not think so. There's a lot of ways we can improve it, but I really want to welcome the risk-based approach, which I think is really a correct one, and also the fact that it is a regulation, not a directive, with clear legal basis in Articles 16 and 114 of the Treaty of the Functioning of the European Union. So we know we're going to talk about harmonizing rules. Rapporteur Benifei set the tone when he mentioned fighting fragmentation, and I really side with this position, aiming at the emergence of a much needed single digital market in Europe. Now, I will give you some perspective on how we work and our intentions in the Council. I first want to thank the Portuguese and the Slovenian presidencies for their work, especially the Slovenian presidency. There's already been a lot of progress on the text. The Slovenian presidency clarified the scope, for instance. There are a number of definitions that have been fine-tuned, including that of AI systems in Article 3.1. Also regarding prohibitions, Article 5.1c now contains the extension of the prohibition of using AI for social scoring to private actors. So a lot of moves in the right direction, I think. I'm a bit more careful about the extension Annex 3 that was proposed, but that's a personal opinion, and I think we'll have more debates on this coming up. Now, how about the French presidency, and where are we now? So we are in the first months of the presidency. I think we've already made some important changes in Article 8 to 15. So this is, I think, important articles because they are the articles about the requirements of high-risk AI systems. So we made a proposal in favor of more clarity, also more flexibility. These articles were discussed last week. Our proposal was discussed last week at the Working Party. Jordanka, by the way, you were here in the room with us, and I think our proposal was well received by the other capitals, other member states. Now, what will be our guiding principles in this exercise for the first month and the forthcoming long road ahead? I think we should aim to ensure that Europe taps into the fantastic potential of AI while protecting its citizens' rights. This is really, I think, the balance we need to find. And this requires a legal framework with clear rules that respect innovation capacities and that are in sync with our European values. Clear rules, innovation capacities, European values. Let me take these in turn quickly. Clear rules first. We've made some proposal in the direction of more clarity, more predictability. You know, I hear a lot of voices saying, you know, we shouldn't have any regulation at all because any regulation will come as a constraint, as a burden to providers. This is not my opinion. I think we need rules, but they need to be well designed. And when they are, they can clarify obligations. They are necessary and actually a condition for the ecosystem to thrive. Now, also on this point about clarity and predictability, we should think a lot about the way the rules are going to be operationalized, so what's going to happen practically for providers, for instance. And we need to think about easy enforceability as much as we can and not placing undue burdens on providers. You know, I have a lot of discussions with the CEOs and startups, very small groups that tell me we've lived GDPR in 2016, coming to force into 2018. The first thing I had to do is hire someone just to make sure I could comply with the regulation. So let's think about small actors and not placing undue burdens on providers. And on final point on clear rules, it has been mentioned, so I can go quickly. This act is only one piece of the puzzle. We need to clarify the articulation with other regulation. It's a very comprehensive text with links to GDPR, to the Law Enforcement Directive, for instance, Article 5.1d, applying as a lex specialist of the LED. We need to talk also about liability rules, so really articulating this whole puzzle. Second, I can move on now to European values. This is really going to orient our work in the Council. And I think a lot of progress is needed to bolster trust in the technology. I was surprised we had this, I mean, not surprised, but there was this World Economic Forum study that was released this month. They asked in 28 countries this following question: do you agree that AI systems bring more benefits than drawbacks? China, 78% agree. In France, 31% agree. Netherlands, 32% agree. So I need to work on trust because trust is a condition to AI uptake. And this will orient the work in the Council. It has many consequences. It means, for instance, that we accept and we want some applications to be prohibited. And as I mentioned, AI systems that exploit any vulnerabilities for a specific group of persons due to their age, physical or mental disability is prohibited. And this is a good thing, and this is in sync with our European values. And the third and final point I want to touch on for these introductory remarks is really about preserving and enabling innovation capacities. Now, innovation, I think, is transversal in the text. We can find it in many areas. There are a lot of room for improvement in, for instance, in Title V. Title V is specifically dedicated to innovation. So regarding Article 53, regarding sandboxes, 54, 55, there will be some work needed. Regarding the requirements, I've mentioned this as well. So that's Chapter 2 of Title 3, Articles 8 to 15. Regarding Title 6 on governance, I think will be key. We'll have discussions organized in the Council under our presidency, hopefully, regarding Articles 53, 57, 58. We'll need to keep a clear eye on what is happening here. We had this discussion about GDPR, the text itself, the regulation itself, but we see that the impact of GDPR was also largely from the doctrine and the interpretation that was being made from GDPR by, EDPB, EDPS. So we'll need to think carefully about governance. And finally, and I will end here, we need to leave some time for the ecosystem to adapt to the new regulation. This is at the moment at the last article of the regulation, Article 55, and I think this time of 2 years is, I think, a good thing that we need to preserve. So this is in a nutshell how the work in the Council will be organized. Here are the guiding principles, and on this, I give the floor back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julien, for sharing your views and giving us some information on some points that are very important for the Council and on the next steps. Now, next up is Andrea Renda with CEPS.
Thank you, Maria Rosa. It's a pleasure to be with you, and greetings to all my co-panelists, the people in the audience, and also Brando for his introductory remarks, and Jordanka and Julien for having gathered very useful information. The key question here in the event is whether this is the right initiative, right? Is this the most appropriate initiative to stimulate and promote a good balance between innovation and rights protection in Europe. And I do believe it's a very good first step. For the reasons that I will explain in the next few minutes, I think it is a very incomplete first step, meaning that we need to do quite a lot of work, not only to complete the AI Act in and of itself, but also echoing what Julien was saying before, to complement it with a key part, which is the part on liability, and to build the glue that we need between that piece of legislation and the other ones that have been proposed, and in some cases on which some political agreement has already been found, that will inevitably interact with the AI Act, right? It's easy to talk about the risk-based approach as something that should be cherished and preserved, but there are, and certainly there are two things that could be added there. One is that one of the virtues of the risk-based approach is the fact that several countries around the world are now aligned on the need for a risk-based approach to artificial intelligence. International cooperation on AI focuses on the risk-based approach. The Trade and Technology Council cooperation with the United States focuses on the risk-based approach. To some extent, the initiative of the EU in adopting a binding instrument or proposing a binding instrument that adopts a risk-based approach, even if perhaps they will never confess it explicitly, also inspired a somewhat similar approach in the emerging AI Bill of Rights in the United States. That it's taking also this identification of specific use cases that are considered to be particularly risky, such as tracking users' behaviors, surveillance, and applications that deal with the monitoring of workers, recruitment, and so on and so forth. It's an emerging debate in the United States. And again, as I'm saying, even if they will never confess explicitly that the EU has had a lot of influence on this, I think one reading and listening to the discussions, one can be fairly confident that in this case, the EU has had has exploited the first mover advantage and is having a big impact also on the other side of the pond. When I spoke recently at the OECD Ministerial on AI, the Korean Minister of the Digital Economy said they are looking at the AI Act with the idea of potentially replicating at least its foundations in the Korean legal system. Just to give you an idea of, a little bit more details on what also Jordanka was saying before, also Julian, there's a chance to lead. I have some doubts about the EU's chance to lead entirely by setting a global standards if the governance part will not be quickly and swiftly defined. And I'm going to spend a few more words there. Before that, I said there's two things I want to add on the risk-based approach. One is this international dimension that I think is very important. And the second thing is that you can talk about risk-based approach, but inside that basket, there is a lot that can be looked at. The devil is in the details. A risk-based approach could be extremely conservative and, if you wish, even very constraining on innovation, or it could be well-timed, adequately defined, and dynamic and adaptive so that innovators know exactly how much they should worry about potential impacts depending on the application that they're developing and what mitigating measures are considered to be cutting edge and compliant with the best standards in the industry at that moment. So in order to do this, I think they need a governance that is flexible, that is adaptive. And indeed, Jordanka will remember, because when I was leading the study that backed the impact assessment of the AI Act, I kept repeating to the people in the European Commission that for me, the most important thing is not to think that the AI Act can be perfect or can be extremely prescriptive. The most important thing about the AI Act is the process. It is not the annexes, the pre-definition of what is high risk, what is prohibited, what is not. This is a piece of legislation that has to accompany us for several years. So the most important thing there is to avoid that being too prescriptive, such that the moment this legislation hits the market, it is already largely obsolete. The important thing here is to have a governance system that has adequate resources, coordination, and consistency with the other pieces of legislation, that it can constantly work on spreading legal certainty in the market. And this is absolutely essential. I don't think that the current AI board, which pretty much, sorry, Julian, but looks like a council meeting, right? An expert per member state and the EDPB, as proposed, can deploy those services and can play that role. I think we will need to replicate something that, in my opinion, in the recent past has been one of the best experiences that we've had. And I take myself out of this, but I think the high-level expert group and the AI Alliance have been a glorious moment in the development of those rules in the past. And it's been a moment in which civil society, associations, also businesses, institutions, all together could discuss and contribute to the shaping of a better system, right, of a better governance process. I see a future in which I think the ability to keep a constant sounding board with experts, with the data science community, with the industry, with NGOs, on emerging trends, applications that would warrant a different treatment, or mitigating measures that might change the assessment of a risk associated with a specific application. This has to be the daily life of the AI Act. So this is what I dream of. But to do this, the governance has to be adequate. At this moment, we have a governance in the AI Act, which is only sketched. And it depends very much on what will be done in the different member states. Well, I do believe that some of the problems that we've had with GDPR on implementation and enforcement should not be replicated here. There has to be a system where, and there is flexibility, there is constant adaptation of the rules with a process that is clear and transparent, so that SMEs, individual researchers, larger corporations know what the process is about, how rules are formed, how they are changed. I don't think we can, and I go towards the conclusion. I don't think, and this perhaps Emilia will not like me for that, but I don't think that we should imagine an AI Act that exempts SMEs from compliance with specific regulatory requirements. And the reason is, and I just briefly mention it, that AI and the digital world are contexts in which a single SME can also create enormous risks. Just because of the digital nature of the information, because of the easiness of scaling up specific individual products. Now, that said, I do believe that supporting SMEs, which sorry, Emilia, you certainly will say it later, but are the overwhelming majority and almost the totality of the enterprises in the European Union, will go through meaningful provisions that couple standardization with regulatory requirements, and also at the same time clarifying who this mysterious provider of AI is. In many cases, you can have developers of AI that then provide pre-trained AI systems to deployers of AI, and they have different perspectives and different incentives to comply with regulatory requirements and different positioning towards the regulatory requirements. In some of these cases, whenever SMEs are involved in a more complex chain of contracts, where there's a large corporation that either designs and develops or will deploy the AI system, I think support to the SMEs could be incorporated in a sense that the SME doesn't have to be left alone in shouldering the entire process of demonstrating compliance. That can also be done through experimental processes such as the regulatory sandboxes, but I will not explore further this topic because otherwise I will speak too long. I'm happy to come back to this in the Q&A. But anyway, we have to be a little bit more creative to find a good space for SMEs than the traditional idea of think small first, eliminates these provisions for SMEs, because I think this would not lead us very far. It will not set a world-class example of sound regulation. Final consideration, before Maria Rosa starts yelling at me, echoing what Julian said, I think it's very important. This debate is a mature debate, and I like it because of this. It's been like this for the last 2 or 3 years, in the sense that we don't discuss anymore regulation yes, regulation no. The academic literature is rock solid in supporting the fact that well-timed, adequately stringent, proportionate regulation is a blessing for innovation, including SMEs. And so the issue is how to get it right, how to get it flexible and adaptive as we need it, is not the issue of a binary approach as to whether there should be or there should not be regulation. That is extremely important because it would finally free us of the burden of having to justify regulation in the first place, and can lead us to discuss finally into the details, how do we get it right? So thanks, Maria Rosa, over to you, and thanks for having me.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you very much for your contribution. You have shared very clear messages, and one of them is that the process, the governance, is of utmost importance here. Before bringing in the point of view of the SMEs that was mentioned by Andrea, I'll give the floor to Frederico Oliveira da Silva with BEUC, who will share the point of view of consumers.
Thank you very much to EIF for the invitation, and thank you to MEP Benifei for hosting this event as well. I mean, I have already so many questions, and I would like so much to jump into the debate, but I'll make some quick points, and then we can discuss and have more time. But I'll pick up on what Julian said regarding the survey that was asked to the French and to the Dutch people. And at BEUC, we did a similar survey 1.5 years ago. We asked basically with 9 of our members, so national consumer organizations, if what did consumers in Europe think about AI systems, and the responses were quite similar to what Julian mentioned. So basically, there's a potential, of course, to improve our lives, and everyone acknowledges that. A high majority of consumers believes that AI systems can improve their health systems. It can help to predict traffic accidents more easily. But of course, as every new technology, it comes with risks. It comes with challenges, and of course, the majority of consumers, in line with what Julian was saying, is quite concerned and does not trust in this technology. So unless we regulate it correctly, unless we give consumers the right tools to use them when they feel they need it, unless we ban certain practices which provoke unacceptable risks, unfortunately, consumers will feel vulnerable and won't trust this technology, which is so important for them to use it. Only a few weeks ago, we heard about this example of Alexa telling a child to put her hand on a plug. on an electric plug. So this is the type of situations that we should try to prevent, to avoid. We should look as a concrete example and how can the AI Act and how can the EU framework be used to prevent these situations to happen in the future. So as Andrea was saying, the Commission came forward with a proposal. It's the first legal text regulating AI, so we strongly welcome that. But we believe that the consumer dimension and the consumer perspective is still lacking and the proposal needs some improvement to make sure that this is the case, that the consumer dimension is introduced. So first of all, we would like to make 4 short points. First of all, the definition of consumer should be introduced. So if you look at the AI Act, you read the definition of user, but it's only business users. And of course, this is logic, but it doesn't mean that the definition of consumer should not be added. So this would be just a first proposal. A second point, coming back as well to what was mentioned quite a lot by the previous panelists, is this risk-based approach. So we agree that there should be a risk-based approach, but the risk-based approach should start at the basic layer. And at the moment, as most of us know, that the proposal focuses mainly on high-risk AI systems. And what we would have envisaged is that all AI systems, regardless of whether they are high risk or low risk, are subject to a minimum set of rules. And here, just to be clear, we're not talking about adding a similar chapter to what it is in the AI Act. We're just planning of adding certain principles that protect the EU values, non-discrimination, transparency. So the fact that every consumer that uses an AI system has the possibility to ask the provider of that AI system for an explanation. How did that AI system reach specific output? And the idea at the moment, which it isn't the case at the moment, so would be that all AI systems would be subject to a basic set of rules. Also, we will need to expand the scope. Julien already mentioned that the Slovenians already expanded Annex 3. I think it goes in the right direction, but of course we can discuss that. A third point that we would like to add is that we welcome, of course, that certain AI practices have been banned, but we think we need more ambition here and more clarity. Clarity because if we read some of the provisions, it's hard to imagine how will they apply on a practical manner, and we already focused here on how it is important that the measures apply easily, and more ambition because there should be an expansion of the practices. So we agree, as put forward by the Slovenians, that social scoring should be prohibited when used in private uses. And we would also advocate that the use of remote biometric identification system should be prohibited when used by private entities in publicly accessible spaces. On top of that, we would add one more point to the list of prohibited practices, and this is emotion recognition. So we consider emotion recognition technology as being particularly dangerous. So we would suggest that it is added to the list of prohibited practices, here with a caveat that it could be used under certain exemptions. So in line with the opinion of the EDPB and EDPS, we could envisage the possibility of emotion recognition being used for health research purposes, for example. And finally, my last point is that, of course, consumers should have rights. So my first impression when I read the AI Act was consumers are not granted any rights. So I already mentioned the right of transparency, so to require an explanation from an AI provider if there is some unclarity. Also the right to object the decision of an algorithm, regardless of whether personal data has been used or not. So this is very important to distinguish from the GDPR. And finally, but most importantly, is the right to redress. So at the moment, the AI Act is completely voiceless when it comes to the possibility to redress. So if a consumer is harmed by a non-compliant AI system, he or she should have the possibility to complain first to the company, then to the authority, and eventually to take legal action. And here, very importantly, as it was done with the DSA, there should be the possibility of consumers grouping themselves and to start a collective redress action. This was done in the DSA, it wasn't done in the AI Act, so we would strongly advocate for that introduction. So I fully agree that AI can be helpful to consumers. We also need to make sure that there's an ecosystem that will enable innovation, but we need to protect consumers, and we need to make sure that trust is present and that indeed innovation is present, but with balanced rules. And I'm looking forward for your questions.
Thank you very much, Federico, for sharing your views and bringing in the consumer's perspective into the debate. Now the floor goes to Emilia Tantar, Chair of Digital SME's Focus Group on AI.
Thank you. It is a pleasure to be here and to listen to these wonderful perspectives which are shared here. They are especially relevant for SMEs, and thank you for having us here. I'm a representative for the European Digital SME Alliance. The European Digital SME Alliance is a network of more than 45,000 small and medium enterprises in Europe in ICT fields. Inside the European Digital SME Alliance, we have a focus group on AI. So knowing that we need a trustworthy AI for Europe, we organized ourselves under the guidance of Annika Link, and we are, let's say, brainstorming, and we are analyzing what are the challenges and needs of SMEs handling AI. So we are in the focus group on AI, we are 140 digital SMEs in Europe, and inside of the group, mainly AI comes either from R&D inner departments. So that means that we have research and development in AI, which comes either because the SMEs, they are spin-off of the university, or because they have their founders, customers, and users which require that. For this focus group on AI, we identified some barriers to the AI adoption. So they were the access to finance, data, skilled personnel, and also having a strong, solid ground, which is the Artificial Intelligence Act. This legal proposal, in fact, it is the needed solid ground that we needed, because that was a barrier for SMEs to thrive in AI. What we identified as drivers, they were improving predictions, decision-making support for AI. This is how SMEs use AI internally, either to optimize resources. While working on this, we also focus on specific topics. One of them, it is the data and the AI topic, of course. Data and AI are quite interlinked. So we are looking at the data ecosystem in parallel with all the AI developments, intellectual property, standardization, ethical and trustworthy AI. More specifically, for the Artificial Intelligence Act, since its proposal, we created inside the focus group on AI a dedicated task force to analyze what are the requirements from the Act proposal and how can we prepare and cope, because this can be having an Artificial Intelligence Act and the legal framework, this can be even a trademark for European SMEs. So we perceive it as an added value, and we analyzed what are the challenges and what are the ways that we can best adopt to cope with that. So we identified, we have a position paper which was released in October 2021, and there we identified 5 main directions. The first one, we need clarity in the definitions. The Artificial Intelligence Act, the proposal, is really well shaped and has a clear structure. Nevertheless, the AI definition is not a new challenge. It was in standardization in the research area since the inception of the term, this umbrella term of artificial intelligence. It was a challenge. So this challenge didn't couldn't have been avoided by the European Commission in creating this proposal. What we see there is that some techniques, what we gathered as feedback from the member SMEs, some techniques we are not sure if they are part of the AI definition. For example, one of them is the statistical analysis. Is statistical analysis inside the large umbrella of the AI definition, the panoply of methods, or is it outside? So this is one open question. Then we also found a proposal how this can be addressed, so how this can be clarified, regulating the application rather than technology. So we have the horizontal legal framework, and then when it goes to the specific fields, we see if the statistical method, it has an AI layer or it doesn't have it. So that was the first point, clarity in the definition, the general definition of AI. The second point relates with conformity assessment and the compliance costs. More specifically, in the impact assessment, which was released, yes, it was Commission staff working document, impact assessment accompanying the proposal for regulation of the European Parliament and Council at page 71, there are some estimates on the cost for SMEs. These estimates, they are around 3.5k euros to 7.5k euros. Then we can go to a certain extent till 14,000 euros. Nevertheless, we, while analyzing this compliance cost, we found that there are some costs which are invisible and which are the external consultants SMEs use, the internal costs, the auditing costs, which were not included. So that will increase the overall cost, which is for SMEs. Again, we took a proactive approach. Myself, I'm the co-convener of the European standardization body on the ad hoc group Conformity Assessment on AI. We are the first standardization body, standard development organization worldwide, which is working on conformity assessment. So we have a new work item which should go in this direction. So we take a proactive approach, but then we go to point 3. Standardization plays an important role, especially in conformity assessment, because when performing conformity assessment, we rely ourselves on technical standards. Nevertheless, in technical standardization, we have a really scarce representativeness of SMEs. SMEs are highly underrepresented. So even if we would like to voice our concerns, we have some representatives, I'm one of them, but we are really few if we compare to the large, let's say, corpus of experts which is present. So our voice is sometimes heard, but this can be reinforced. And our proposal is strengthen SMEs participation. We are more than willing to participate and shape the compliance and shape the conformity assessment as to include also our needs. Nevertheless, we need support in participating in standardization. Now it is being made at European international level as to reflect our position, our European SME position also on the market. Fourth, it will go with what Jordanka and Julien and Andrea and all the colleagues Federico mentioned. It will go to liability. The artificial intelligence processes, they are quite complex. The value chain is not only producer and we put them into the market. We have a producer of a system, which can be a hardware system. And then the value chain is quite complex because we have the provider of the data and the raw data, it doesn't have value per se. So then in order to put it into context, we have another entity which intervenes. So the value chain is rather complex. And what about the liability all over this entire value chain? And we see this is, of course, this needs clarity. A clarity that, of course, we can participate in sharing our knowledge as developers, deployers, because we are technology providers. And last but not least, our fifth identified point, of course, there is this need of more clarity on the high-risk definition, but SMEs, we are concerned, but not that much about this high-risk definition. What we are pragmatically concerned is having access to this testing environment. We speak about sandboxes. Having access to and being a proactive part of the testing environment. We know there is Digital Europe, which goes in that direction, and there are others. But specifically for SME, to ensure they are part of the process and they can provide feedback. Now that they are creating the sandboxes, the regulatory sandboxes will be long-lasting. So the way that we would like to reduce our costs also and to ensure that we are aligned and we do not risk having technological advancements which are outside what is foreseen in the regulatory framework is being an active part. And then if we have facilitated access to the sandboxes, that will be a pragmatical tool which can support us. So these were the 5 points that we identified in the position paper. And I do hope it clarified some of the concerns which were raised in our positioning so far. Of course, it will evolve as long as the Act proposal, it will evolve. We will also adapt to that. Thank you.